morning. Thank you very much to all participants connected on this training session, and thank you to our host institution, CICTO, the Center Information and Technology Office of Belize. Actually, many of the participants from CICTO will be joining very shortly, as they were assigned a task this morning. Unexpectedly, they will be joining, as they have confirmed in a few minutes. My name is Mike Mora, and I'm a specialist with the Department for Effective Public Management of the Organization of American States. I'm responsible in this case for the implementation of the Open Government Project for Belize from the OAS side that delivers this training. Welcome to the third dedicated training in open data of the project promoting an open government ecosystem in Belize, implemented by the Trust for the Americas and the Department for Effective Public Management of the OAS, with the support of the Embassy of the United States of America in Belize. In this session, we will learn about open data by getting to know how open data was implemented in 3 OAS member states, that is Argentina, Colombia, and Mexico. Of those government officers who lead these efforts in these 3 countries, we will hear about how it happened there, what policies and institutional changes were made, their challenges and tools, among other topics that they will be speaking about. Today, we especially would like to thank the governments of Argentina, Colombia, and Mexico for participating in this training session for Belize. These are 3 governments leading open data in the region and very well positioned in the world as well. So thank you very much. Thank you to the Ministry of Modernization of Argentina. Thank you to the Ministry of Information and Communication Technologies of Colombia, and thank you to the National Digital Strategy of the Office of the President of Mexico. As mentioned in our last training session last week on Thursday, these open data training sessions that we started are oriented to a reduced group of government officers. For the purpose of this project, we consider the Open Government Champions Network of Belize. Our goal is to embrace, specialize, and develop skills in a dedicated group of officers to innovate, transcend, and improve public service delivery through open government, and that also can become agents for change in doing so. So I want to thank you for your attendance and commitment this morning, the last week, and for the following trainings. Remember, we have a training coming up, also another session on Thursday. The videos to the last 2 sessions, together with the presentations, have been shared with the participants. We encourage you to revisit that material and also find ways to share with colleagues with your own institutions. Please let our local project coordinator, Mr. Henry Wade, in case you do so, and or need support in setting up subsequent training sessions in your institutions with this material. I'm sure Mr. Henry White could help you in the process as well and be a support locally in Belize for this training. Actually, for any questions about the project and to engage, please contact our project coordinator in Belize, Henry Wade, who's connected on this session and who you will see actively in the chat and also at the end of these presentations, moderating the question and answer session. One recommendation is please prepare your questions and share them throughout the presentations using the chat tool of this platform that it's on the right bottom corner of the screen. We will collect the questions throughout the presentations and have them ready for the speakers once the 3 presentations are over. Without further ado, I would like to present the speakers of the day shortly, as we want to just hear from them. They are Ms. Andrea Barenque from the National Digital Strategy with the Office of the President of Mexico. She is Deputy General Director in Open Data of the Government of Mexico. Thank you. She's right there on the screen. Also, Mr. Agustin Benassi, who is the coordinator of the Argentinian National Open Data Policy within the National Data and Public Information Office of the Deputy Secretariat of Public Innovation and Open Government of the Ministry of Modernization in Argentina. And last but not least, Mr. Enrique Cusba, the Deputy Director of Digital Government of the Government of Colombia with the Ministry of ICTs there. Thank you to all three. We couldn't ask for a better set of speakers to present these three cases. Again, let's see how it works with Agustin as we move on. Therefore, I will change the presentation order as that I had Argentina first. So I'm just going to let Andrea go first. And thank you also for bringing some gender balance to the session as well. And you can begin. I'm gonna load your presentation in the PDF actually because I couldn't get the other one running on time. But feel free to use it. You've been in this platform before, and then we move to Enrique, and then Agustin at the end. So thank you very much, Andrea. And just for the sake of this presentation, I want to ask Enrique then to turn your camera off. I'm going to ask you to turn it back on once we get to your presentation. Thank you very much. Andrea, it's all yours.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen, right? Or okay, great.
I have your presentation here.
Oh, great. Thank you. Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. As Mike mentioned before, I'm Andrea Barenque, Deputy General Director of Open Data here in Mexico. Thank you for considering us in this session. As you may know, we are in the middle of an administrative transition here. We had federal elections a few weeks ago, and we are at the right moment to consolidate our policy to ensure its continuity. So that's why the main objective of my presentation today will be to speak how we are undertaking the open data approach in Mexico. And beyond that, beyond speaking about the success or failures that we have had here, what I would like to share with you and to communicate is a generalized methodology to create value through the data reuse with the hope that this methodology can be taken and used by you and also by others. So let's see. During this administration, a national digital strategy was created for the first time as part of the National Development Plan. This strategy gives meaning to digital politics, to the digital politic agenda in Mexico, in a transversal way to all areas of government and to the federal government. It has 5 national public policy objectives and 5 enablers that allow achieving the compliance with this national main goals. So open data is one of the key enablers of the country's development objectives and goals. To provide institutional support to this enabler, an open data policy was built here in Mexico in 2015. This policy defines open data as the digital data of public domain that are accessible online and can be used, reused, and redistributed by any interested party. Something that is important to mention is that this definition is shared in other types of the federal regulations, such as the General Transparency Law and the Open Data Technical Norm, which was published by the National Institute of Statistics and Geography also in 2015. So, with the aim to help public institutions in compliance with this policy, we published an implementation guide comprised of 4 main steps with clear instructions that allow public institutions to accomplish the progress and to be monitored by us and see how they were compliant with the national policy. The first version of this guide was published in 2015, And then in 2017, the implementation guide was renewed with collaboration of citizens, users, and open data experts in society and also in government, also in the private sector too. And this renewed version maintains the four stages of implementations embodied in the 2015 version, which are planning, publishing, perfectioning, and promoting, as you can see in the presentation. And the objective of this new guide is to strengthen the use and impact of open data in all sectors of society. Beyond this, I'm sorry. Okay. Beyond all of this, we have built a narrative of data as infrastructure. I mean, put open data in the center of the development of our country. And with that in mind, and precisely because of that, is that from the start we have focused on both sides of the equation, of the open data equation. From one side, the supply side, which pertains mainly to the government and powered by an executive decree and this implementation guide that I was mentioned, which basically sets up an open by design policy. Demand, from the other side, is the demand by facilitating the uptake of data as a public good and productive input through catering initiatives aimed at supporting national objectives and generalized actions to promote discoverability and reuse of open data. And in the center, the main objective is to create value and impact for citizens and to comply these national objectives. So this is the main goal of our national open data policy, because it is at the center where people are, where citizens are, where users are, and where we can make through change through open data. So with this in mind, we have achieved the publication of more than 20,000 data resources of 241 public institutions, also state governments, municipalities, and some of how do you say that? Some civil society organizations and some private data that from the beginning accept to share their data. And through this data, 148 use cases have been created with specific impacts in different sectors. And we have also seen the trend in the use of data through the monitoring we give to the policy. For example, we see that the biggest downloads are in areas such as education, work, also cadastre. And from a high-level perspective, our strategy is very simple. It's about going beyond the simple use of data in projects to really undertake organized, scalable, and replicable initiatives that can meet our national development objectives. This means facilitating the work of all sectors of society and their experts to help them create impact through more efficient and smarter methods. And it means also changing how government thinks as well, thinks of itself, what it does, how it does it, and what impact it is having through evidence-based methods that can leverage the ubiquity of data to help us better understand the world and our cities, and how can we better act to oh, can you hear me? Can you still hear me?
Yes, Andrea, I can hear you well.
Sorry. Okay. So we are doing this through a methodology that we created based on 4 simple steps. The first one is open data for national objectives, as I was mentioned before, by prioritizing and finding the right questions and being opportunistic of the context that we live in. The second stage is building strategic partnerships. For this, we have reach out to expert champions here in Mexico and in the international arena, set the right governance framework here in Mexico, and strengthen connections among um, diverse actors in all 3 sectors. The next step is a pilot test assumption by a demand-driven disclosure of the data, the construction of a capacity building strategy, and evaluation and constant evaluation of monitoring of these pilots. And finally, the institutionalization of these initiatives, which is the main and the most important step of this methodology. This is finding the right business models for the pilots that we initiate and implement internalization strategies within institutions to ensure the scalability of these projects. Of course, we have relied on technological tools to comply with this methodology. The first one is Adela, which is behind datos.gov.mx. And this platform emerged as a tool to facilitate the release of open data by the agency. This platform allows 2 main things. The first one is to generate an opening plan, which is the publication dates and updating frequency of the data that agency are publishing. And the second one is the data sets documentation in the organization's catalog before its publication. So this platform also is a renewed one from the one we made in 2013, and it's a more intuitive and user-friendly platform version that allows more independent process to the agency and to the public officials. We also have a harvester. We incorporated a harvester to our main technological tools as an automatic publishing mechanism for organizations with their own open data portals and their own open system. We also published last year a new section in datos.gov.mx, which is called Developers. And this gives direct access to the open data catalog of datos.gov.mx through an API. And this section, this API allows a greater level of data accessibility to our users. And it is open code, so it also enables to upload any SICAM portal to an API. In this new version of Adela, we also have a public tracking board to give transparency to the open data publishing process in the fulfillment of the institutions. And well, with all these tools, and as I mentioned before, our methodology is based on the development of pilots we choose open data to generate impact in a specific sector. So I want to share with you 3 or 4 initiatives that follow this methodology that I was sharing with you. The first one is Data Lab. Oh, sorry, Mike. I think that this isn't the latest version of my presentation, but it's okay, and it doesn't matter. Okay, so the first initiative is Data Lab, which later became GovLab. I'm going to, yes, here. Uh, Data Lab was a laboratory for evidence-based development and evaluation of public policies. We developed a database project in the health, anti-corruption, and security sectors, and we collaborated with top academic institutions, fellows, and government officials to develop these initiatives. Because of the success of this Data Lab project, we decided to take what we learned and evolve and institutionalize the first unit of strategic data and technology-based intelligence um, in the office of the president. So we created GovLab for promote the use of the whole data spectrum, open data, social network, um, government and private data, data from private institutions, data from civil society, to give smart advice to the head of the government here in Mexico through evidence-based methodologies and facts. The second initiative is the Open Contracting Project. This initiative initiated in the implementation of the Open Contracting Data Standard in strategic projects such as the new International Airport of Mexico and the Telecommunications Shared Project, which is one of the biggest telecommunications projects here in Mexico. And we developed automatization and visualizations tools to help the citizens to better understand data within the procurement process of these two main projects. We also, in collaboration with civil society and the private sector, um, um, conformed the Open Contracting Alliance here in Mexico. And then within the federal level of the government, we created the Open Contracting Policy for all public procurement at the federal level to institutionalize this Open Contracting Data Standard. We made this platform with the help and working hand in hand with the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Public Administration, and we released this open contracting portal last year. So I'm going to go with the Mi Salud project, which is the last one that I want to share with you. This initiative is Prospera Digital, initiated as Prospera Digital, which later evolved into the Mi Salud project. Mi Salud is the first program in the world to use a digital platform to disseminate citizen material for prevention and health promotion. This digital platform contains modules about maternal and child health, chronic diseases, and also hypertension, so that the government now can understand better the patient's needs and support them 24/7. And the last initiative that I want to share that followed our institutionalization methodology is the implementation of the Open Up Guide for Anti-Corruption made by the Open Data Charter, which basically was implemented by 3 phases here in Mexico. The first phase was mapping mapping exercise to fill out inventory of anti-corruption data. We worked with groups with more than 40 public servants that produced and consumed potential useful data to fight corruption. And we identified more than 65 useful data sets in Mexico to fight corruption. We created also a method to rank the level of openness of this data. And in the second phase, We generate and tested the technical and analytical capacities for data processing within the government, and we generate and well, we promote the action by public servants, civil society, journalists, and private sector for better use of this data. So we identified cases and trends of uses to fight corruption here in Mexico. And in the last phase, we built and documented these case studies and build up some recommendations to leverage open data at the federal level and which is the most important part, the national anti-corruption system. So now this new body um, has better understanding of the anti-corruption data infrastructure in Mexico and can use it to take better decisions and to design and implement more impact, yeah, more as and to strengthen the anti-corruption agenda in Mexico. We also have identified use cases from third parties related to civic innovation, data journalism, and education. And we have also, okay, sorry, yeah, we are exploring new ways to unleash the power of open data in projects such as Labora FinTech, which is exploring the implementation of the open banking data standard in the prevention of natural disasters to a group of open data and humanitarian technology within the National Council for Civil Protection. Also, we are moving to the development of a national artificial intelligence strategy and to an open by default schema at the federal government by the incorporation of our terms of use, which are Libre Uso MX, that is our datos.gov.mx license, to incorporate this license into gov.mx, our one-stop shop for the federal government. So we also are aware of the challenges of our open data policy in Mexico. And as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, the most important challenge right now is to prove that policies like this are worthy and that is worthy to maintain and strengthen them through administration. So that will be all from my side. I will be very happy to answer all of your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea. Great attributes of this Mexico case. I love it, and I do have questions, but I will leave that for the end. But great to hear all the attributes. It's very rich. I wish we had extra time to go in detail in a lot of these aspects, but thank you very much. I appreciate your time with this presentation.
Thank you.
Without further ado, I'm gonna let Enrique Cusba turn his camera, open his mic, and begin with his presentation, which I'm gonna load here in just a second. Again, Enrique, it's connecting from Bogota, Colombia, and he is the Deputy Director of the Digital Government within the Ministry of ICTs. So thank you, Enrique, for your time, and eager to hear your presentation. Please, it's all yours.
So, thank you so much, Mike, and all the team and all the participants here. My name is Enrique Cusba Garcia, and well, you just mentioned I'm the Deputy Director of Digital Government here in Colombia. So what I'm going to present is basically the open data approach from the digital government view. Here in Colombia, we have different sources or different stakeholders working on open data, and one of them is digital government. So Thank you so much. Let me just begin by saying that we here in Colombia started working on open data since 2012. And at the first stages, at the first levels, we try to encourage or provide advisory services to public agencies in order to open information. Basically, we started with central level, but over the years we had to start working with local level as well. So now we are trying to understand what we call the ecosystem, the open data ecosystem. I mean, it's not only about releasing data, it's not only about working with public agencies, but we need to establish different agendas or different initiatives with private sector and such civil society, academia, and any other actors. So the other point is that we understand that we need infrastructure, we need services in order to promote the use of public information. And from the governance framework, if you don't mind, Mike, or who is in charge of the presentation, can you just move on to the next slide?
Yes, you can use the arrows on your keyboard to move left and right.
Ah, sorry. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Here, I'm gonna talk a little bit more about this data governance framework. And from the legal viewpoint, we have basically two tools. The first one is the transparency law. Sorry for the mistake. It's transparency law, which establishes that all public agencies are responsible for publishing all that information that is in charge of. So it is mandatory here in Colombia for all public agencies, including the executive, the judicial branch, to publish information. So this is probably one of the biggest topics that we achieved in 2014. 2014, and the other is the digital government decree. So all these, basically these couple of laws are the base to implement open data. But we also understand that law is not enough. So right now we are in a process of, we just created a new policy, which is the government data exploitation policy. So it's not only about transparency or publishing information, but we think that we have to start working on the exploitation of this public information. So there is a policy document that is associated with data exploitation here in Colombia. And on the other hand, we have a bunch of documents, standards and guidelines that allows public agencies to start working with open data. So from the legal framework, we have these two sides, the transparency law and the government data exploitation policy. From the stakeholders' viewpoint, the Ministry of ICT is responsible for the Open Data Initiative, but we have support coming from the Secretary of Transparency, which is part of the President Office, the National Planning Department, and the Statistics Agency. So these are the main institutions, public institutions, leading the Open Data Initiative here in Colombia. And from the civil society viewpoint or other actors, we have been working with civil society organizations, the academy, uh, the journalists, because we understand that all these are enablers or are the group of citizens or private sectors that can use all the public information released by public agencies. And on the other hand, we have established some initiatives of some projects with research centers and entrepreneurships. One of the projects we just finished last month was developed with the support of entrepreneurs. About incentives, we also understand that we need to probably put some incentives to all these stakeholders. Basically, we provide advisory services to public agencies at central and local level, and we develop different promotion campaigns in order for citizens to understand the value of open data. And finally, we have devoted some resources, some financial resources, in order to promote the development of application that make use of open data. From the technological point of view, we currently have our open data portal. It provides information or data sets from about more than 1,000 public agencies. We currently have published over 8,000 data sets. And in order to make use or take advantage of all this information and thinking about the emerging technologies, we now have to start working with an infrastructure that allow us make a better use of this information. I mean, it's not enough. I mean, having a platform, having the open data portal is not enough. We have to start working with all these information systems of public agencies to integrate information and other services if we want to make a progress in open data. And finally, we have an assessment on the especially on the use of public information. One of the main challenges right now is the quality of information. So we have created what we call the Seal of Excellence, which basically certifies that one data set accomplishes with all these quality standards. So we have implemented this initiative, and right now we have about 600 data sets which are high quality data sets. On the other hand, we follow the international indices, OECD, for instance, or the barometer, or all these international indices that measure the progress of open data initiatives. So this is the framework, the open data governance framework here in Colombia, and just to mention some results of this initiative. I was talking about the work with entrepreneurs. So in the previous months, we finished a project, an initiative that as a result, we could get about 50 business models for 50 applications that use open data. And on the other hand, we are working right now with the academia in an initiative which is called Datos a la U. So what we try to do with the academia is that students, a group of students and professors can work together in order to implement a project which can be an application or a study or a research by using open data, incorporating open data. And we are about to finish this call. Last year we developed this initiative as well, and we got about 60 products in applications, studies, research, visualizations, and so on. The other area that we're working on is civil society. A couple of months ago, we worked together with the Ministry of Finance in order to identify probably corruption or some failures in the implementation or in building some infrastructure projects. Roads, for instance, public schools, hospitals, all these social infrastructure. So we developed an exercise in which different stakeholders, different actors participated, and we got really good results. And finally, the last branch of our work here in Colombia is journalism. So we've been working with El Tiempo, Data Sketch, La Silla Vacía, which are groups of people working on journalism in order to make different strategies, control strategies, political control or social control over the public resources or so on. So Data Sketch, for instance, was born about open data, and now this group provides information about politics and other social aspects that help or have helped citizens to improve the access of information. So the next point is about digital government policy. Open data is part of the digital government policy, and this policy looks at the improvement of digital services. This is the main objective of the government policy, digital government policy. Basically, we look at the improvement of digital services, internal process, efficient internal process, the decision-making process based on data, and the empowerment of citizens. And also, we have established that the public value creation is probably the main objective of digital government policy. So what we have thought is that it's not sufficient with developing ICT projects if we don't resolve social or political problems that we are facing right now. So this is our main goal, and this is part of the objectives that we are starting working right now. In previous year, we defined what we call the roadmap. The roadmap was an initiative that focused on the main problems that public agencies were facing at that time. So we identified about 17 projects related to services. And we also identify five sectors that needed to open their information. And those sectors related to data were health, education, agriculture, housing, and well, I don't remember the other, but basically what we tried to do was just focus on specific topics, not only working with all public agencies as a whole, but one specific group of information. And as a result, we got a great amount of data sets, and now we are thinking on the next step, and just let me a couple of minutes and I will explain what are we doing. The other topic is the alignment with a broader scope of objectives. We have defined that the Sustainable Development Goals is our main umbrella to implement the digital government policy and the open data initiative. So we are promoting the solution of public problems and the use of information to develop a more aggressive policy or a more aggressive strategy. In the new policy, in the new digital government policy, we have defined five main objectives. The first one is about the quality of digital services. It's not enough, putting services online is not enough. We have to improve the quality of those services, and this is one of the main objectives. The other area is the decision-making process based on data. Some countries call this smart government or something like that. We understand that we have to improve our decision-making process, and data is really important, and data is essential in such task. The other aspect is about security and internal process. I mean, how public agencies can improve all these information systems in an integrated way. The other is citizen empowerment. We recognize that we have to work with citizens, and probably this is the center of our policy. We have moving from citizen-centered to citizen-driven strategy. So we have to change some approaches that we have established or we have been developing in previous year, but we need to improve, or we have to follow the citizens empowerment objective. And finally, we also understand that all these services, all this data, all these problems, all these decisions are based on a local level. I mean, probably the central level have evolved and have been working very hard on this ICT strategy or this digital government strategy, but the main challenge is about the local level. So we have to work with cities or territories in order to implement this digital government strategy. Let me just mention a couple of samples that we have right now in open data. The first one is about health, and some researchers or some group of citizens developed an application which is called Click Salud. ClickSalud allows people to compare the prices of medicines provided by different laboratories, so they can make decisions with this information. So the numbers that we have is about 7,000 people making use of this application and taking decisions about where to buy medicines, where to find the cheaper medicines, and this has improved the quality of life of these people. The other project, which was published last year, has to do with the agriculture area. This was a project composed by public agencies, private sector, and academia. And what they did was just, they took information about climate over the last 25 years, and they mixed this information with rice crops, because there was a difficulty in rice crops. Farmers were really worried about the climate change that is currently happening in Colombia. So we have a climate, is changing, is really vulnerable, and then they took all this information and they put all this data together, and they identified that they have to cultivate rice in a better way. There is a number in terms of impact that establishes that they saved about $3 million in implementing, due to this exercise. So farmers in different regions of Colombia learned to make more intelligent decisions about when to sow rice, or when to cultivate rice, and all sort of things. So this is a second example of what we are doing right now with data. And the last one, is about procurement. So the Ministry of ICT supported the procurement agency in order to release all this information about contracts. So we have now about 6 million contracts published in open standards, and many universities or research centers have used this information to identify, to compare prices, providers, number of contracts, corruption risks, and all this thanks to the publication of the release of information about procurement. So these are just 3 examples of public value that is what we are working on right now, is how public information create value, and this is just 3 of those examples. And finally, we want to share with you a little bit more about what's next. Through the years, over the last years, we have realized that if we don't understand the use of information, probably we're gonna have a portal with many data sets, but we are not solving or tackling public problems. So the first point about what follows here in Colombia is to understand that public agencies have different problems integrating technology. Open data is not isolated from the other ICT projects. One of the main challenges that public service mentioned in a meeting that we had last month was the data framework is perhaps the most difficult to understand, and that agencies is not isolated from the other projects. So we have to integrate data management into the whole ecosystem of every public agency. So this is one of the main challenges that we are facing right now. The other element is opening with purpose. One of the first strategies that we carried out in 2012 and 2013 was tell public agencies to open any information. It didn't matter what type of information that was, but now we have to focus on relevant and necessary information, and information that creates or generates public value. The other aspect is about integration of different types of data. Thanks to the development of technology, we have seen that there is no difference between private and public information. We have to put all these data sets together and start working in a better way. So there is no difference between public-private structure and structure. I mean, in terms of use of this information, all this information has a value, a high value that we have to take into account. The next step or the next topic is about stakeholders or different stakeholders, or working with different stakeholders. Despite the fact that we have been working with academia, journalism, entrepreneurs, private sectors, public institutions, we have to strengthen this connection. So we have to work in a better way. I mean, we have to coordinate, we have to establish a framework, a governance framework that allows all these stakeholders to contribute to the Open Data Initiative in different levels. And perhaps, and as mentioned before, the local level is perhaps the main challenge. We have made a good progress in the central level, but we have to work as well as with the local level. And finally, we are starting working with emerging technologies and artificial intelligence, big data, Internet of Things, and all these sort of emerging technologies are present, and all these actors demand from the Ministry of ICT or from the Open Data Initiative to start working in a structured manner by using these new technologies. So we have created an artificial intelligence center, and there are a couple of exercises running right now. One of them is about corruption, the other is about justice, and there is another which is about health, how to improve the access of citizens to health services. So this is where Colombia is doing right now in terms of open data. So that's it, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Enrique, for this great presentation. With a lot of insight, same as with Andrea's presentation from the Mexico experience. The Colombia experience here, the Colombia case brings a lot of very interesting attributes to this discussion. It is well taken, your point on thinking of open data, of data in general, data, that is an end result but about something that fuels um, better public services and better public service delivery or better decision making. So not looking at the data as an end result, but actually what data can do in all those aspects. So that's great insight. And of course, even for commerce, agriculture, in oil takes all it takes to do that by supporting initiatives that actually promote the use of open data. So thank you very much, Enrique, for that insightful. I remind all the participants that have joined us to send your questions and leave them in the chat tool on the bottom right of the screen. We already have one from Inaldi Gomez. Thank you, Inaldi, for that question to Andrea. We recorded it, and we will leave that for the end. So without further ado, I'm gonna just set Agustin here, who's going to tell us about the Argentina case and see how that works. I'm loading your presentation right now, so once it's in place, you can start anytime. Again, for all participants, leave your questions in the chat section. And just to remind us all, the Agustin Benassi here joining us from Argentina. It's the director of the Open Data Policy of Argentina within the Ministry of Modernization. So we're glad to have you here, Agustin.
Well then, I'm gonna talk a bit about how we conceived and then deploy open data policy here in Argentina. In our case, our open data initiative is very new. It's from 2016. Before that, there was little done before. So, open data policy in Argentina started 2 years ago with this question: how can we achieve it in a comprehensive, meaningful, and sustainable way, right? Well, it's probably the same answer that we all give to us. We have to sort of develop a public data infrastructure. So in that regard, we also think as Mexico that we have to think data as a piece of the infrastructure of the country. So at the early beginning, we started to think, okay, we're gonna build an open data portal, so we can just publish all the open data there. And then very in an early stage of that moment, we realized that it was going to be very difficult to just manage the open data policy in a centralized way. So we shift towards a focus of how can we build a network of open data catalogs under administration of their own organizations within national administration. So that was the strategy, as we say. We said, okay, we are going to build this network, and we are going to have like a central catalog, which is datos gov.ar, to be just an indexing catalog with no original metadata or even any data, but to be a central single access point for the citizenship to access data that is actually allocated in decentralized catalogs. That was our idea. Our idea started in 2016, and then one key aspect of this thing was if we are to be able to manage in a systematic and sustainable way this network, we are going to have to develop and enforce a few standards for the local organizations in the national administrations to be able to publish their open data catalogs in a way that we can automatically read them and put them into the central catalog. So then the question, when we were like okay with the strategy, the question was, how is the best way to create and make these nodes networks stronger? So we start establishing processes and developing tools to implement them, to implement the processes. In our way to see the open data policy, we didn't like start with a really strong normative approach. We did start with an executive order saying ministries are going to have to commit to publish certain data, but it was somehow very weak or low level, like low level in the sense that they were in charge of their own open data policy, and they were asked to just say, okay, what do you want to publish? Just commit to something that you would like to publish, and then stick to it. So that first normative starting point was just meant to be the initial point in which we built this network of people, let's say, in each ministry, that they were saying, okay, these open data champions, let's say, I'm gonna carry the open data policy of my ministry. So we discovered those actors thanks to the normative, but the normative was not more than that. And then we devote ourselves to how can we build several tools. So actually these processes that we need to establish to manage this network in a decentralized way can be like automatically done. So I think our let's say our open data package for the administration has 4 components or 4 category of components, which are very introductory material, which is more about evangelization than actual standards. It's more about what's data, what's not data, what's open and what's not, and then harder guidelines that we're going to talk more about now. And on the other side, tools to deal with data and tools to deal with metadata. Something that at least we had a lot in our mind when we started was it's not going to be enough for us to be successful to just write down normative. We are going to have to, or even a process, we are going to have to build tools to make easy for the ministries to meet them, and especially taking into account the diversity of sophistication that those ministries have inside them. I mean, there are ministries that they were already building APIs, and there were ministries that didn't have enough capabilities for publishing a CSV file, for example. They were just using Excel files in a really artisanal way. So we had to deal with that diversity. First of all, the guidelines. We started in 3 different kind of guidelines. The most probably broad one is the open formats guideline, which is general standards that they are in common use in the open data community, as what extensions of files to use, what's the best way to put a date, a number, or general things about you should specify the code for the currency if you have currency in a data set, things like that, preferring vertical tables rather than horizontal tables. And then we started to write another guideline about what we call interoperable entities. These would be those entities that you find in each and every very frequently in every data set, that they allow you to cross data sets between each other. For example, let's say an interoperable entity would be the provinces of your country, the departments or counties of your country, or for example, the local postcodes of all the country. or a different interoperable entity is the organizations of the central administration. For example, the map of the state, let's say. Those are entities that you find in many different datasets, and you need them to be really, really normalized in codes they use and the strings, to use the official strings rather than any other alternative schema that each ministry have. So that was another really important guideline. And the last one, the one that we probably put more enforcement on it, was the metadata guideline, which was these are the ways that we are able to read your catalog. So you can develop and implement a catalog in many, many ways, but the end result should be always the same file with the same structure in which we have these metadata fields. So first of all, we actually started with SICAN as a technology for an open data portal. It has upsides and downsides, but the upside probably is very commonly used abroad the community. So you have answers for many questions there, rather than other open data portals that are less used. But then it's really difficult to install. You have to have a fairly skilled development team to do it. So our first attempt to make this easy for other ministries was to develop a specific distribution of SICAN that we call Portal Andino. And then we were saying, okay, this distribution is very opinionated in style, in design, and in standards for the metadata, along with our guidelines, and it's really easy to install. So many ministries that they wanted to have their own open data portal, they opted for installing Portal Andino, which is a Dockerized version of SICAN that you can install hopefully with just 1 or 2 lines of code in the server. But then there were also other ministries that they were saying to us, we don't really want an open data portal, or even we do have our own website. We don't want to change that. We just want to use our website. We want to comply with open data standards, but we don't want any portal. So for them, the approach was, as long as we can have this JSON file, the data.json file, that an idea that we took from the US, we are okay. So we don't need you to have a portal. We just need you to document your data in this way. So there were a few ministries that they opted to just implement their own system to build this data JSON file. Some of them, they even edit the JSON file by hand because it's not that hard. So for that, we have to build some metadata tools to be able to validate that, to translate that into different formats, or even to operate a catalog in such a way. And then we have probably our most popular option now to build an open data catalog is just an Excel file that we encourage ministries that they have their own websites, or even they don't have a website and they don't want to have it, to just fill out this Excel file that they should have in their own digital property, their own website, that is the representation of the same metadata schema in a few sheets in the Excel file. So they just fill out that template and they can maintain that up to date. And within 4 hours that they make a change in the Excel file, the change is reflected in the centralized catalog in Datos Gobar. So for that, we have to extend our tools to be able to validate and give feedback for that use case, because of course the Excel file is really easy to implement, but it's also prone to mistakes because you don't have any inside validations on it. So, but we have to do that because many ministries would not have an open data portal or even their own website or capabilities to just implement their own version of the data.json file. I would say that the three most important metadata tools that we have developed are a Python library that is open source and free to use for anyone that wants to follow this kind of approach. Allows you to easily change between catalog representations, like read an Excel file and convert it to a JSON file, and read a JSON file, convert it to Excel file, and even with that very simple tool, simple for developers, you can read a data JSON file and federate each data set into a SICAN or into a Portal Aldino or special distribution. So that was one thing. And then we built network administration in a Django application that is just like a UI using this Python library that allows us to administrate the network and to select what data sets we want to federate into the central catalog and what data sets we don't want to federate, and to see things like how good is their metadata, if we have to probably send them feedback to improve it. That was our attempt to have a lightweight administration tool for non-developer people to be able to manage the network. And finally, this SICAN distribution that I told, we consider that as another way to manage a metadata catalog of open data assets, right? Some important thing that I would say that in our case, we only deal with the national administration so far, although we would probably like to deal with subnational levels in the future. And we struggle a lot, but we are still able to comply with our idea of not automatical federation. So we just, when new data sets are available in the network, we see them in the system. We took a few minutes to look them through, to see about the quality, to try to use those tables and be able to give feedback to the area. Hopefully, the areas wanting to reach the central catalog, Datos Gobar, they are very open to feedback and suggestions, and they often do changes to improve quality very fast, so that they can say up to their own ministers that they have reached the central catalog, right? So that's our tool to enforce quality, even if we don't have normative mandates to do it. On the other hand, we also build some tools about data. Some of them should not be called tools anymore, I think, because they have grown. But there is another Python library that we very opinionated also that try to crystallize our guidelines about data quality in a tool that you can use if you are a developer. And then we have built two APIs that I'm going to talk about it a bit further. One for normalizing territorial units. We think that one of the strongest interoperable entities that we have to definitely fight to normalize are the territorial units. They are a key aspect of crossing data sets between each other. And then we have starting to think about how can we have really high performant APIs with more sophisticated use case, as for example, time series. Time series are all the indicators that evolve within time. And I'm going to talk about that at the final part. So I'm sure that I don't lose all the time in that. So a few cases to build up on how this decentralized strategy works are, for example, we have this is the way that standard Portal Andino looks. This is the Ministry of Agriculture, and they have opted for their own open data portal. So they have installed this one, and they are happy with that. So what's really important for us is that that portal makes this JSON file that is the thing that we read in our system, right? So this is the end goal for us to be able to read and update the network every 4 hours. A different case was the Ministry of Transportation. They have a development team, and they didn't want the a second portal, so they opted out for instance, to build their own website, a very simple one, but a nice experience, though. And they implemented their own data JSON file. So also behind this website, you have the same kind of standard for us to read the metadata. And another, well, this is the National Geographical Institute. And they are one of those cases, they already have their own website, but they didn't have development capabilities, so they were very happy to opt for the Excel file. And the Excel file, if I have it here, looks pretty much like this. So it's not obvious in the picture, but you have one sheet per each entity of a catalog. You have a catalog, that's one entity. You have data sets, that's a lower level entity, and then you have distribution of resources, which is an even lower entity. So they just fill out this Excel file, and they are able to publish their metadata that way. So briefly, the current status of open data policy in Argentina right now is we have built this network that we are not still 100% complete. This is how it looks. The national open data portal, the central catalog, right? Some really interesting things I'm gonna just set in the margin is how important for when you don't have like a normative backup to build incentives for areas. And something really interesting was the image you are seeing. If you look carefully, there's just one gray. The only gray that you can see is the foreign issues, the topic of foreign affairs data, right? So we were spontaneously contacted by the foreign affairs ministry, saying, why is that button gray? Why are we not publishing any data? And we were like, well, actually, nobody is publishing foreign affairs data, so you should do it. And they are now implementing their own catalog in Excel file. And we didn't have any kind of contact with them before. We didn't have any strong data champion there. That was just spontaneous because they saw themselves like in offside, for saying in a way. So currently, the network has centralized ministries, but also decentralized organizations, such as the Geographical Institute is decentralized. So it has 22 nodes already launched, and there's another 7 that they are building away. And as you can see, the total network that we can track is about 957 datasets, and we just federate 639 of them with this criteria that we were saying about to reach a minimum quality level to be able to reach the central catalog, right? If you see distributions or resources, which sometimes is like a better way to have an idea of how big is the amount of downloadable files that you have, it's about that we probably federate a few more than the 50% of the resource available. And then, well, talking about next steps, we now feel that we confident enough that we have learned a lot in these 2.5 years about how the process can be and what standards are easy to comply or what standards are not that easy and how to make them easy, supporting them with tools and with proper documentation for the areas. So we are now starting to have the discussion about writing down some of these processes and standards into normative finally. So we are probably this year or the next year formalizing this concept of every ministry should have their own catalog, and an open data catalog is this data.json file, even if they can comply with that in several ways, which is a similar approach to the United States open data policy, with the difference that they just they had the normative power enough to just say, give me the data.json file. I'm going to build some tools, but this is your responsibility. But instead, we had to take 2 years to be sure that the ministries were able to quickly comply with that before having any normative. Also, we are, as you can imagine, we are tracking internally many different indicators about the network. But we are now thinking about the next step, which is public monitoring the network and putting some care in which indicators produce the desired outcomes in the ministries to react, to react in a positive way. So we are just watching our indicators and trying to test if they do say something significant and clear about the quality of data or metadata of a ministry, enough to be able to be an impulse for them to be better, right? Just imagine that if just a gray button make a ministry wanted to publish open data, maybe several very carefully chosen indicators can have the same result or a better one. And last, what I was saying before, one of our most exciting future developments, well, future, I say future, but current already, and also future developments is how can we build an API, data web services paradigm that is designed to tackle specific use cases, not that specific that it's just an API for 10 people, but also not that broad that they don't really address many operations that users do to data and they consume much time on them. So one was this API about normalizing territorial units that I was telling. This is for internal use now in the public administration, but next month is going to be for public use generally, with quotas, of course. Something we learned doing APIs is we have to have a very careful freemium approach. We have an open quota for IP. And then if we need more quota for internal organisms within the administration, we have like tokens for that. So we can increase quota for them. And then we have this time series API that we are also very excited about, because we just built the system. Let's talk about this a bit more. I don't know if you have used the Federal Reserve Economic Data databases. Well, if not, you should try it, because it's a very interesting approach. They have like a 500,000 social and economic indicators in the structure of a time series, and they have a very complete experience in which you can go to a website and search and build your own graphics about time series and smashing them together and taking away your query to have it in different systems. They have the open API also behind that experience. They also let you to just take away the entire database if you want. So with that in mind, we also we talked to them actually, and we the difference between them and us, they have a really huge development team, and they build ETLs, like routines for extracting transformation and loading data. So they develop a new routine for each new source of data they have. In our case, we cannot do that. So we worked a lot in use the metadata profile to be able to have a single specification of, okay, you publish open data, but what if you can also mark in your catalog, this is not just any CSV file, this is a CSV file containing time series. And containing time series in a certain format, right, in a certain structure. So we did that, and we are now able to receive, to read, when we read automatically these data JSON files of all the administration, if they have marked any CSV file as I have time series here, we can just automatically add them to the API. So it's kind of a distributed design in which they can publish regular, easy to generate and to publish CSV files, and we read them once in a day, once per day. So you can have the same information with just a 24-hour delay replicated in this API. This API that you can just use, for example, this website that you are watching right now is the website of the what will be the economics ministry in Argentina, and this landing, this website that you see, thanks to the API that we built, it was just a 1-month project of a very, very junior front-end developer, right? And they are very happy now that the website refresh automatically, taking those same CSV files that they are really used to publish from years ago. And this is just one of the first products that someone built upon the API. Then we have, well, of course, they have an Excel catalog in which they publish about 20,000 time series. And I think 2 weeks after we launched the API was launched last December. We already have third-party development as is this UI experience against the API. So we were excited to see that when you put open data in the proper service designed to ease a specific use case, quickly many independent developers in the community take that to build their own products. And we have also had many contacts with analysts that use now the time series API to be able to automate their reports, specifics for example, in economic consultants and in academy, they are now like automating reports and following economic indicators that they publish daily or weekly or monthly. So that's a line of work that we have to carry on working, and we build all the parts as open source code because our aim is to be able to expand independent versions of things that we code or things that other people code against these APIs. So I think, well, that's gonna be. I don't want to make it longer because we are pretty tired after 3 presentations, and I hope we can have a nice Q&A session now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Agustin. Thank you very much for your presentation. Definitely standards, metadata, highly important. The approach taken by Argentina, of course, makes it look structured and simple in a way, although it's not simple to get there, of course, but in a sense of establishing the basis in such infrastructure that makes it easy for everybody to plug in, but as easy as possible. So also very good attributes presented here by the Argentina case. So thank you very much, Agustin, for that. I have to apologize and excuse Enrique from Colombia, who had another meeting and had to jump to last minute call that he received, and so time has advanced. We're supposedly 2 minutes away from finishing up this session. Three rich cases to learn a lot about, and there was one question set on the on the chat, but I'm gonna let Henry to take over the Q&A and try to see, let's see, not mindful of the timing of all participants, how we can do this quick Q&A, I guess, beginning with the question that it was left at the chat by Inaldi Gomez to Andrea. And if Andrea, you're there, and if you got that question, just go ahead and open up. And as I said, Henry, feel free to open up your mic also to continue moderating this session. But thank you to all participants, and thank you to all three speakers for bringing those important remarks and insights out of these three cases.
Hi, good morning, Mike. Can you hear me? Are you guys hearing me clearly?
Yes, I can hear you. This is Andrea.
Hi, good morning, Andrea. Henry here, connecting. Good morning, guys. Connecting from Belize. A wonderful presentation. It's been very, very informative seeing the different case studies and success stories across the three nations. I know, I guess I could speak for the rest of the participants here in that I'm excited to see the developments and potential that can occur on the ground here in Belize. So again, thank you guys so much for the great presentations. As Mike indicated, we had received an initial question from Inaldi Gomez from the Immigration Department here in Belize. And this was addressed to Andrea during her presentation. And the question is basically, what improvements can you report that are tangible that have benefited Mexico's economy, its anti-corruption efforts, or governance? Would you have statistics to demonstrate those improvements? Example, revenue increase in revenue over the last 5 years. And this is, again, directed to Andrea. And perhaps it could also be a question that can be answered by Agustin as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Henry, and thank you. I forgot the name, the person that made the question, but yeah, here in Mexico, we believe that the next phase of the open data policy will be actually that, to start the measurement of the impact in monetary terms, in terms of economic development, social development, etc., and how open data and data in general have benefited people's daily lives. So we do have made monetary estimations in terms of the data that previously were not open. We have calculated how much similar data costs in the market and what is the savings for the people by having them now available. But we do not have reached the level of statistical and very accurate data in terms of impacts and benefits. Our greatest achievements so far, we consider that have been that we have proven to decision makers that better public policies are constructed through data, and that data is the main input for the work of any government area. We have moved from a open data evangelization through an open data publication strategy to an open data use for impact, and now we are in the point that the next phase for proving that this is worthy, as I mentioned in my intervention, is to measure how this impact in the daily lives of citizens. So last year the OECD made a study of the open data policy so far in Mexico, and one of the main and principal recommendations were just that, start to measure the impact in terms of economic and social development.
Excellent. Agustin, I see that you shared a website that Mike has also shared with the chat room. Is there any other input or information you can share from the end of Argentina?
Yeah, sure. Measuring economic impact is definitely a big issue in the community. We have to somehow be accountable of what we actually are able to change in the ecosystem. It's very tricky. I feel it's very tricky. I have seen studies doing that, and somehow you're not really sure about the methodology or how to do it properly. I would say that in Argentina, the best economic impact evaluation that we are actually conducting is once again exploding this time series API, because well, the API was hit already more than 1.5 million times, so at the rhythm of 8,000 per day. So we are carefully analyzing the nature of the queries, and we are estimating how much time are they saving in economic data analysts. So that is, for example, one approach we're taking, like how much is the cost of average economic data analyst in Argentina, X, and how much time each of certain type of queries is saving of those data analysts. So that's a very straightforward way to measure economic impact, we feel. So we are putting that evaluation together to be able probably to talk openly about that in the International Open Data Conference that just for taking the word out is going to be in Buenos Aires in September. I just hope that you are all coming, or at least one representative of each of you. And yes, we are definitely aiming to put a grain of salt, or how do you say, of sand, in how to evaluate the economic impact, but in a really like sophisticated way, or a very straightforward way. So I hope we can chat more about that in September, and to discuss the methodological pertinence of how we model that kind of evaluation.
Okay, thank you, Agustin. I see we have a comment and a question combined by Byron. And I'm not too sure if this is directed or can be answered directly by the presenters, but perhaps a little bit more on Mike's end. And this is something that I think we had, if I'm not mistaken, addressed in one of the earlier sessions. But Byron is asking, and he's from the Ministry of Public Service here in Belize. After all these presentations, I believe we now have a good idea of where we stand and perhaps what we need to do. One of the benefits is that we are learning from the experience of these countries and can use it to build our very own. Perhaps you could elaborate on very own, Byron. Is that the open data portal that you're talking about? But his question is basically, how willing are these countries willing to help us, including the OAS, and what extent, in order for us to have a good start in this initiative? So I guess part of the project, Byron, if I could take a quick little stab at it, and then perhaps Mike, you could add some additional comments. That's what this project is aiming to do. The project here in Belize is promoting this and creating an open government ecosystem here in Belize. So as Mike had mentioned at the onset of this presentation, under the auspices of the OAS and the Trust for the Americas, in partnership and funding with the U.S. Embassy here in Belize. That's the creation of this ecosystem project as an initial step. But great question, Byron. Mike, can you add a little bit more on top of what I just mentioned?
Yes, thank you, Henry, and of course, thank you, Byron, for the for the question as well. Yeah, I think just like I just have to second what you just said, Henry, and express that it's our objective with the project to support that precisely. Of course, one of the initial stages that we wanted to work on was in sensitizing and in training a little more about what this is all about. But the next phases of this project will precisely contribute to support that. And so we had a series of activities after these trainings that will actually taking place on site through something that is called, it's two activities. One of them is called the National Dialogue Tables. It's a methodology that OAS implements, supported by experts of other countries such as Mexico, Argentina, who have supported us in the past, in order to support countries to set their national open data policies, for example, as a specific outcome of those national dialogue tables. And then we set a methodology, we sit down with you, with civil society, we start drafting concept notes of what that policy should look like, start making sense of all the attributes that need to be contemplated according to the specific needs, requirements in Belize, and of course mindful of international experiences and resources out there that can be useful to strengthen any national open data policy. And from there, which we think is an initial step. From there, obviously, also deepen and work on developing the proper tools to continue implementation of the open data. That actually is not necessarily the objective of this project to build a portal, for example, but certainly the initial stages of building capacity, sensitizing, building an ecosystem in Belize, and also with a policy that will enable basically the road for implementation is what we're looking for there in Belize with the project. So for those activities, and together with the second activity that I didn't mention, I just focused on the national dialogue tables. It's the best practice exchange forum, which is another activity of this project that will be combined with the dialogue table in order to sit down, talk, and find conclusions among all of us. Well, you exactly. We are just facilitating the process, but among the stakeholders in Belize about how that policy should look like and what's the roadmap to continue moving forward. And so that's the outcome. And for those activities to keep informed, just connect to us on Facebook. It's the page where we're basically showcasing activities of this project, but also in contact with Henry Wade, who local coordinator of the project, who will be there to continue keeping you engaged in this project. And it's our very important goal to strengthen this small group, as I call it on the introduction, a dedicated group of officials in Belize who can act as that core ecosystem and also as agents of change for what's coming. So these are our first steps. So thank you very much, Ryan, for the question, and we'll continue to be engaged on this. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Looking at the time, Mike, if you could please advise me on a time for the Q&A session. The reason I'm asking is I've noted, and I have a couple questions here that I'd like to address to Andrea. in particular with regards to her presentation. And I wouldn't
Let's try.
keep the presenters too long.
I'm sorry, I don't have too much time here, but if you would like, you can send me these questions and I will be happy to answer and go back to you by email if you want. I can answer one or two questions quickly,
Okay.
but also, Mike, I let this decision to you.
If I could squeeze one question in, Andrea, that would be great.
Yes, of course, go ahead.
Okay, you during your presentation, specifically on the Open Up Guide in Mexico, you noted briefly a quick little synopsis of that initiative. My question would be, did this initiative receive full political support from its inception, and what have been the benefits thus far?
Okay, yeah. We had a previous experience in the implementation of the open contracting data standard. So at the time we started implementing the Open Up Guide, we have like win a few battles against the uncertainty about open up some spatial data related to contracts and the procurement process. So when we started the implementation of the Open Up Guide for Anti-Corruption, the open data literacy and the open data and the understanding of open data within government was a sure thing for many of the data generators here in Mexico. So we didn't have like enough trouble for implementing this. The main obstacle that we find out was where the data was located. Some of them were in systems that weren't interoperable, and some of them weren't really generated or open by default. So the main obstacles that we find out in the way were in terms of quality and open data availability. So that, and well, it's too early to talk about benefits and impact, but as I mentioned in my presentation, the main goal that we can share with you is that this open data infrastructure is now taken care by the National Anti-Corruption System, and that they will look for it updated and use that for constructing the anti-corruption national anti-corruption policy here in Mexico.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrea. Can I follow up on that initial response by asking the open contracting? Because that was actually one of my other questions that I wanted to ask on open contracting in Salud and the Open Up Guide in Mexico. Regarding the open contracting, which all ministries, departments were initially involved? Was there a lead agency to help coordinate those efforts?
Well, we, as the coordination of the National Digital Strategy, were the leaders of the project. But the two main, for the implementation of the standard at the central level, at the executive level of government, three main institutions were involved: the Ministry of Finance, which had data from the investment and planning process of the procurement process, and the Ministry of Public Administration, who is responsible for the Compranet system and who has data from all of all of the remaining stages of the standard. So the Ministry of Finance has two systems, two internal systems, and the Ministry of Public Administration has Compranet. So these three systems unfortunately are not talking between them by now. They are not interoperable. We at this time we are extracting some parts of the data from each of one of these systems and put it all together in a JSON, and that JSON is the one behind the open contracting platform. But this at the federal level, at the central level, there are these two institutions which are combining data for accomplish the standard.
Andrea,
And how
thank you
long
very
did
much.
that process take?
Because I know you have to
Sorry,
rush
Mike,
to-
go ahead.
But thank you very much. We appreciate your support in this session.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And again, if you have further questions, you can send me that to my email. And of course, I would answer all of them.
Thank you so much, Andrea.
Thank you.
Sure,
Thank
I can
you,
also
Mike.
answer
Yes.
any questions by email also, if you like.
Thank you, Agustin. So, Mike, do we at this point in time wrap up the training session number 3?
Yes, I think so, Henry. I want to be mindful of the participants' time and beyond the speakers also, because I know there's also obligations and commitments in Belize you have to respond on, and I think this has been a great exchange so far. Just by saying so, I would like to remember us all that for our next session on Thursday, which is going to be focused on specific cases of, actually users, the technical aspects of using open data, and that's going to be important as we're moving along with this training session. I'm leaving the information on right there in the chat. We've seen the introduction to open data. We move from there to the principles, the open data charter, different resources. We have seen now how those concepts work when this is implemented by the three cases of Mexico, Argentina, and Colombia, all combined. We start seeing some technicalities presented by Argentina in terms of the platform, metadata, and other things. So the next session is going to be very important, and it's about the technical aspects of creating data sets. So we're going to dive into more technical aspects. I encourage you all to attend next Thursday, 10 a.m. Belize time. Be there, and for that we have Camila Salazar, who's a very well-known person also, who will speak on behalf of the School of Data of Social TIC, and have to have her here by then. So thank you all, and I'll let you close, Henry.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for the reminder. Again, guys, we're starting Thursday at 10 a.m. And also, we've shared a glossary of open data terms via email. So we're asking if all participants can review and be up to date with the open data terms prior to Thursday's session at 10 a.m. Again, we want to thank everyone for participating. Our presenters. It has been a wonderful presentation yet again. Thank you to Mike organizing all the way there in Washington, D.C. Our trust for the American colleagues, Rodrigo, and to all of you participants who've kept with the training process. And we know it's There's a lot of responsibilities on your plate every week, every day, and we appreciate you guys taking the time out to join us for these important training sessions. I think we're at the midway point, 3. I do believe we have 3 more to go. So please, if there's any questions, guys, please feel free to give me a call. Please feel free to email me any questions you might have for our presenters that we can then forward to them and have them share their responses with the group. It has been, again, another great session, and I just want to say thank you and have a great day ahead. Mike, thanks so much again, and have a wonderful day in Washington, D.C.